Today on Better in Our Backyard, we'll be featuring Minnesota State Representative John Burkel and Minnesota State Representative Spencer Igo. Representative Burkel represents District 1A, which includes communities like Thief River Falls and Roseau, Minnesota. And Representative Igo represents District 5B, which includes communities like Grand Rapids and Pine River, Minnesota. Despite being on opposite ends of northern Minnesota, Representative Burkel and Representative Igo have two things in common. Number one, both are freshmen in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And number two, both are seeing a positive impact that the construction for the replacement of Line 3 is bringing to their communities and the district that they represent. And both Representative Burkel and Representative Igo were kind enough to sit down with me for a quick chat to discuss more in depth of the positive impacts that they have been seeing on a day-to-day basis within their communities. And first up is Representative Burkel. Since Line 3 began construction, how have you been hearing any feedback from communities on how maybe the project is positively impacting local residents?
Oh yeah, all the way from, the instant they started, and the employees started rolling into the hotels and the restaurants as things opened up. Specifically in Hallock, I know some small hotels there that just, instantly were full. They for the last year, they've been sitting there vacant, practically, nobody's moving, nobody's going anywhere. And so I know that the hotel businesses all the way into Thief River Falls, how it's impacted the small town cafes and restaurants that have struggled through the pandemic, being shut down off and on again. Yeah, they're just very grateful to finally have that business rolling through, and they're full, and they need that revenue, they need that bump. It's been a really dry run for those folks, and it's nice to see when you drive by. I'll drive back down to St. Paul here on the after the weekends when I go home, and it's just fun to drive through Thief River Falls and see cars at every hotel and customers at every restaurant. And I know for a fact that in Thief River Falls in particular, it's really been a big boom there. So no doubt.
Yeah. And one thing too, I appreciate on top of the project, and I don't think it gets said enough, is I've said this joke a couple times, but growing up in Boston, I had an uncle get a job at Enbridge, and it was like people celebrated like he was set for the rest of his life, because I mean they've been such a great employer, especially in the Clearbrook, the Thief River area.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in small towns like Viking, Minnesota, I mean, they've donated equipment to their fire departments, and they really go out of their way at Enbridge to become part of that community. They really do. And so I think that's what people miss. I've been on calls with, folks who've voiced their opposition to the pipeline early on, as the permitting process was being done. And on a rare occasion, you might hear a local call and voice concerns about the pipeline, but most of the negative comments were from the Twin Cities metro area. The folks who really are affected up north, appreciate what Enbridge and what the Line 3 projects really brought to the area. And from a tax standpoint, it's incredible. I mean, 20 to 25% of the tax revenue for those counties like Kitson, Marshall, Pennington. It's just they're the largest property taxpayer in those counties. So it's a big deal for northwestern Minnesota.
Absolutely. And when you were talking earlier about hotels filling up in Hallock, I had to think, I wonder if they've ever even had a busier time in the history of their, yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. And you got the small businesses in town that, the gas stations, and if you look at how poor things were as the pandemic progressed and how quiet things were. I remember specifically a call I got around Christmas before I was even sworn in from a gal over in Grigla, who was a small hotel over there, and from one of the restaurant owners over there. Right before Christmas, and they were just down in the dumps. They'd been shut down for the second time due to the pandemic. And there's just a point where business owners who don't control their own destiny really are they were despondent at that point. And so I know just now you can just tell the energy in these small towns that the pipeline workers are rolling through. It's entirely different. and the economic activity that it brings to the area is just incredible. And I know, some of the critics have said, well, it's a short-term burst and it's, employees for the short run and then they go and they move on. But the real truth of the fact is the capacity that this new pipeline is going to bring through. I mean, as far as the amount of oil flowing through it and the valuations that brings to the area and that tax capacity that these counties are going to see, it's an incredible boost to these local economies, and the counties need that money. So
Yeah, well, and that's another great point too. I mean, that isn't short term. That's for decades in terms of
exactly,
property
and
taxes.
the boost is like $34 million above and beyond normal years. So I mean, when you start talking about a quarter of your revenue stream is coming from one company paying taxes there, it's a big deal, and people appreciate it. And what they really appreciate, one thing, like I said before, Enbridge has been a great neighbor to these people as well, and they take care of this property as they're rolling through, and they're aware of the fact that they want to be part of these communities. So
Hallock, when you mention Hallock or, even Thief River, I mean, these aren't tourism towns, so it's not like, from what I understand, like from what I assume anyway, they probably don't necessarily have busy times of the year.
right,
Maybe I'm
yeah,
wrong, but
it's not a seasonal. These aren't seasonal communities that revolve around resorts, and no, not at all. Exactly. So they, and I know even at Thief River Falls, like just your local quick change, oil change places, stuff like that. They're just swamped with Enbridge employees, swinging through to get an oil change, or the car dealers are selling. And they've had folks come through and say, I just need a cheap vehicle to beat around town until I leave. So they're just the amount of economic activity that spins off of the fact that all these employees are in town is just incredible. It's hard to even measure.
well, yeah, and another point I just thought of too that when you're going back to that kind of like short-term investment type point, or where it's just a couple years, if these businesses aren't used to this type of increased revenue or profit margins over, a couple, like over a 6-month period or 2-year period, however long the construction lasts, these business owners are smart. They know that this isn't going to be forever.
Yeah,
But that's going to just funnel their rainy day account so that when they have slow years, or God forbid another pandemic goes around, they can still hold strong for a couple months on random slow periods as well. I think that's something that people don't talk about either.
totally. And the timing of this couldn't be better for those communities that struggled with unemployment due to the pandemic and struggled with, the lack of economic activity in their counties. And then you have this thing roll through. It's a healing process right now for those 4 counties up there. It's been one of the best things that could happen. And thankfully, we got through all of the permitting process, and enough of the lawsuits were settled, and we got to the point where this thing could get rolling, and the healing that's going on for these businesses right now is necessary and needed.
Switch gears a little bit. I was going to touch a little bit on Enbridge's Line 3 replacement project, but just out of curiosity, just ever since it began construction, have you been hearing anything from, the communities that you represent on any positive impacts that they're feeling from the project?
Oh, yeah. So, positive impacts from Line 3. So, obviously, it doesn't run through Grand Rapids anymore, but Grand Rapids is still close enough to, be the hub for the region, whether it comes to, shopping, food, even places to stay, right? My hometown of Grand Rapids is booming. There's people coming in and out, whether it be buying new clothes. I saw there was an article about how Glenn's Army Navy was just doing gangbusters business during the cold snap to make sure everyone working on the pipeline was protected. All of the rental housing and short-term housing in Grand Rapids is filled to the brim. Our grocery stores are full. Department stores are full. Small town shops are, buzzing. The bar and restaurant industry, in a time where they desperately need people to be coming back in and having patronage more than ever. Crazy. And then we go over to the other side of my district, Pine River and Bacchus. The pipeline runs right between both those cities. They are loving what the boom has brought to them in a time where, as we're coming through the pandemic and putting it behind us, which we are, I must say that. Not many people are saying that we are beating this thing and are just about done with it. Having that kind of life injected into my communities has been a game changer to get us on the road to recovery from this pandemic.
It was extremely frustrating last summer when they kept delaying it, because I think folks like you and I saw that, what this could do for small town communities in northern Minnesota, and to finally see that come to fruition is just an awesome thing to see.
Right. And I hated the opposing message on it because it was saying that, oh, it's bad, it's bad. Well, it's not. In one, like Enbridge's quoted, it's the safest way, but oil's not going anywhere, not for a while. And I know that bursts a lot of people's bubble, but when you look at MISO and you saw how much fossil fuel is used to keep us warm during that last cold snap, and the grid was over 60% fossil fuel, I'm sorry, we're going to need these pipelines for a while longer. And I don't want them rupturing. I don't want them breaking. And that's why the project was a no-brainer. And that's when I was trying to explain it to people. I'm like, here's the deal. It's making this pipeline is not going to keep us more fossil fuel dependent. I'm sorry. We're just making sure that it's done correctly and safely. And I'm just happy to see it finally happening. I love driving home from the Capitol, and I'll take one of the ways home where I cut across it, and I'll see one of the gigantic landings and all the progress happening. It's fantastic. With the bar and restaurant industry, all those guys and gals that are working on the pipeline are coming in to get a hot plate of food after their shift. Talk about a shot in the arm when they've had to be closed for weeks on end and limited capacities. And you can't create a better economic incentive than this pipeline project right now.